I've said to many people since, I made a mistake. I closed my eyes. Because when I opened my eyes, the feet had straightened out.
Wow.
The children were jumping. I mean, it was just carnage.
Yes.
Who cared what we were teaching from that moment on?
Yeah.
I mean, it was fantastic.
Welcome everybody, this is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. I'm very excited to be with you for another week. We've got a fantastic guest. What is Inspired? The aim is to be upbeat and uplifting. It's going to introduce us to many friends of mine in all walks of life. It celebrates dogged perseverance, gritty overcoming costly faith, and the stories, as you'll find even this week, they're of adventure, risk-taking, and hopefully they're going to stir us to imagine new possibilities. There's so much bad news out there, and I just want to counteract that with a bunch of good news from my friends doing beautiful different things from around the world. And this week we've got David T. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Now, I am very excited. David and I met only about 3 months ago, and David had been in town in Bath to do some speaking engagement, and then he was brought along to our street outreach, and we went out there, and then I invited back for lunch. So our friendship is only 3 months old, and one meal at home together. But even in that short time together, I sort of caught some of David's fire, and I'm so excited. David's been a teacher for much of his life. He's played county cricket. That little sport has taken him all over the place, and we're going to hear more about that. So, David, let's just get in there. And if I'm sounding a bit out of breath, I've just literally dashed back from the park. David, I said about half an hour ago, guys, that I'm just going to take the dog out for a walk. And in the park, I had this fantastic meeting with a guy on the bench, and ended up praying all the way through with him. And he's joining me on an Alpha course on Tuesday. So I just got to share that because I'm just really excited and a bit out of breath and sweaty. I've just taken my jumper off. But anyway, and I also tell that story because I know that you've got loads of those. So. And I'm looking forward to hearing how God has given you special encounters and in all sorts of different spheres. So let's get to start, David. What's your background? How did you have an encounter with Jesus? What did that look like?
Yeah, background. I lived just north of London. Got a brother and a sister, and it was a Christian upbringing, but the church experience I had was more attending. Mm-hmm. Rather than any personal knowledge of Jesus. Mm-hmm. That was, I suppose, that completely changed when I eventually got to teacher training college. And I say eventually because I really struggled at school academically. And that was a real struggle for me. And I think it actually helped eventually when I got to the college in my encounter that you've just opened up there, because I had a term. Mm-hmm. After that term, things had not gone well. I'd come home for Christmas, and my brother and others were saying, look, what you need, David, is you need to know Jesus. Mm-hmm. And my response really was, well, look, what do you mean I need to know him? I mean, I've heard all about Jesus, so I thought, in my upbringing. And I spent 2 or 3 weeks muddling and mulling it over, and got back to college for the next term. And there was something totally longing inside of me. I longed to know what they knew. And I just decided I have to go for it. Yeah. And so I put aside the food that I couldn't really properly eat. I was just sick inside, and walked down into the chaplain's office and said, I don't think you know me. My name's David, but I've just become a Christian. Because at that moment I said, yes, this is it. I'm going to say yes to you, Jesus. And that was my encounter with Jesus. And I had 3 years getting to know him with all sorts of friends I got to know at college. So that was my start, and what a start.
And would you say that there was quite a dramatic change in you? Would people have noticed straight away or not?
Yeah, definitely. I was quite short of confidence, quite shy, and there was just a confidence that I couldn't describe any other way. I just felt at ease in myself. I think for the first time. And certainly some people said, "So what have you done with yourself?" I've heard various things like that said. So
Hmm.
yeah, there was a definite change. Yeah.
And then you talk about having quite a powerful encounter with the Spirit. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, again, my brother played a part. Uh, the second holiday, so I'd been a Christian for 3 months, and at Easter, he said, "David," he said, "the next thing we need to do is to take you along to a friend of mine and to find out about being baptized in the Spirit."
Hmm.
And again, I at this point I was thinking, I've never heard anything about this, but I was so in love with Jesus immediately that I wanted everything
Mm.
that he had for me. So we went along to this guy, a doctor, who opened up Acts chapter 1 and chapter 2 and the 1 Corinthians 12, looking at the gifts of the Spirit.
Hmm.
And I looked at all of that, and there was just a desire thumping into my chest that I wanted everything God had for me.
Mm.
And I think particularly they prayed for me. I was just joy just flooded my being. I can only describe it like that.
Mm.
I spoke in tongues that night, was just amazed at all that God had for me and was doing in me. And I think at that point that I looked through the gifts of the Spirit as they were going through them, and my eyes bulged open when I realized what God wants to do
Hmm.
through me and through everybody. And so the gifts of healing and word of knowledge and miracles, they were the ones, it was as if they were highlighted, underlined, written in capital letters. Um, and those particular gifts are the ones that I suppose I've had. If I could have a relationship with a gift, I
Yeah.
suppose those are the ones really. Yes, since then.
Mm. And I mean, I know we'll have people from different sort of theological persuasions, but we know, don't we? To some is given the gift of blah blah blah, and we're all different, aren't we, as part of the body?
Yes, very much so. We are completely different, aren't we? And I mean, yet at the same time, I do believe that for me as a Christian, I want everything that God has got for me.
Me too.
And so my desire is that in looking to teach others, that I just want to encourage them to reach out and
Yeah,
receive whatever He's got. I mean,
yeah.
it's vital for me.
Yeah, I would love it even as we're talking. I mean, at different points in my life, I've been hungrier than others. I'm sure that's everyone's case. But, often I've been like, God, I am just desperate for everything that's going because I want to be more effective for you. I don't want to sort of say, no, some gifts are not relevant
Mm.
so just a real openness. And I was preaching just last week on, and one of the lines I said was, how much do you want of God? Because no one has less of God than they want. And so I want part of this podcast is sort of breeding a hunger in listeners to say, yeah, there is
Yes.
more, and I want more, and I want everything. And Lord, you can have everything of me.
Mm.
So how did those, I mean, one of the filling of the Spirit in Acts, one of the signs of that was clearly boldness. Did that accompany your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't. It says, doesn't it? I mean, you will receive power, and you'll be my witnesses. And I just wanted to tell everybody just just how wonderful Jesus is. I mean, to experience the joy of having all the past, all the guilt, the confusion, so many different things just removed almost in front of me.
Hmm.
It was so good. And so, I mean, I just wanted to tell it, and I did. I went out telling everybody. I think I was at times rushing ahead faster than I needed to. And I've learned over the years that to walk with the Spirit and in the Spirit.
Hmm.
And I think that's been a lifelong journey. But, it was good to tell people
Yeah.
because He is so good.
Any stories that stand out from those early days?
Yeah, I mean, I had 3 years there. I went. I think it was in my. I think it was my second year at college, I play a lot of cricket, so I actually got picked for a tour to the West Indies, and I went out there. It was, if you call it a baptism of fire, it
Hmm.
was a baptism of fire, partly through who we were playing against, but
Yeah.
but really one particular story stands out. We played a game in Trinidad up country, and we went in a minibus. 16 of us jammed in this minibus to this ground. It was a pretty torrid journey in the minibus. Everyone was singing every coarse song they could possibly think
Mhm.
of. It came round to me, and I felt backed into a corner, and all I could think of doing was singing a Christian chorus.
Brilliant.
Everything went quiet in the minibus, but those people knew where I stood, and it helped me to stand. This is who I am.
Yes.
And we got to the ground, and to cut a bit of a story, I went out to bat, got out first ball, caught behind, came back. It was total noise. I walked, wanting the ground to swallow me up. There were about 10,000 people watching, and it was a big and a difficult moment. We went out to field afterwards. I was left down in front of a large section of the crowd, and somebody yelled out to me, "Hey, man, what are you here for? The booze and the women?" Right. So I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to answer? So I said, "Hang on a minute," turned around, and I walked into the next delivery and came back. No, 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 no. I'm here to play cricket and to tell you about my wonderful Jesus.
Oh.
And so that was just a big moment because
Uh-huh.
I stepped out. I didn't know it was coming, of course, it just happened. And for about an hour, on and off, in between deliveries, I was just sharing stories about what I knew. And I don't think I really knew that much. I didn't at the time,
Uh-huh.
but answering questions. And it was tremendous. And it got easier and easier as it went on. I came on to bowl. The whole of that part of the ground came cheering for me, so it was like my own support. It was wonderful. Anyway, at the end of the game, we won by 1 run. It was wonderful. But at the end of the game, we had a sort of dinner, and the guy who was the guest speaker was the Olympic 100 meter winner from all those years ago in the 60s, Hasty Crawford. And he said, my man of the match for an innings of whatever it was is this. But actually, I have a second man of the match. It was to a man who told me and hundreds of others where I was all about my beloved Jesus.
Oh, beautiful.
And I can, that experience just meant everything, because there I was now realizing, hey, look, I have shared my faith to all these people, and just to know that I've talked about my Jesus was wonderful.
Beautiful. Well, listen, I'm maybe we'll get in a few more sports stories, but let's. I know a lot of your life was in teaching, so how
Yes.
has your faith gone hand in hand with life as a teacher?
Well, the answer is completely. I mean, I definitely have seen my teaching career. I mean, I retired after 40 years in the job, and still, and I now still work in education, but I would love to still be teaching if I'm honest.
Hmm.
I mean, I just see the fact that my life is a life where everything's together. I
Hmm.
mean, my faith needs to needs to be seen in all my actions, in all my activities, and in all that I do. So certainly, that's how I've approached teaching. I'm sure I've not always done it brilliantly, and I've made my mistakes, but at the same time, God has been incredibly good in all that He has given me and shown me and done.
Hmm.
Many times with incredible miracles that I've
Mm.
seen, healings I've seen, uh, just as I've gone about my daily work in school.
Yeah.
It's been phenomenal. So that would open up that subject, certainly.
Yeah, well, coming from my context in Africa, there's no issue about sharing faith in school, and as a teacher using your position, obviously in the fiercely secular Western context, it's a much more delicate subject, isn't it? But I know you've just had some incredible encounters. So go on, just tell us a few
Well,
of those.
yeah, I mean, I think. I think I will preface it by saying that, certainly when you go back a few decades, there weren't the same difficulties potentially as there are now,
Right.
as you've outlined. But I think at the same time, I've learned to be wise.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, I've been bold where I've needed to be bold. Many times I've not been bold, and I think it would have been brilliant if I had been. But I think my first school was in a town called Cobham.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined the church there, and that was a great experience. But I think in my teaching, everything it kind of kicked off about 3 years into my job when a boy asked me, and I was teaching maths, I think, and he suddenly said, "Mr. T, how do I get rid of sin?" Wow, what a question to ask. It was wonderful. And I obviously, it was oh my goodness, how am I going to answer that now? And I simply said, look, I can't answer it right now, but if you stay behind after the lesson and anybody else who wants to, I'll answer it as briefly as I can, and we could perhaps take it from there. So that was great. And about 2 days later, we started a Christian group. The head was happy for me to do that. And there's a story which happened that day, which again, through all my teaching, has been the starting point, a catalyst, I guess. Remember now, it was key what I was saying. I was saying to them, if you ask God for something and believe you're going to get it, and I did say, it's not about asking for Mars bars, things like this.
Yeah.
But I said, if you ask God for something and believe you're going to get it, and then you'll receive it. Ask, believe, receive. And I've seen the simplicity of faith with children all through my life. There was a boy, not in the room. It was a warm day, windows were open. He heard those words, went home that night. He'd had an ice skate rammed through his one of his legs, shins. And I didn't know about it. He knelt down by his bed. He told me. And it simply said, God, please will you heal my leg? Thank you. Amen. And went to sleep. Woke up the next morning, looked at his leg, which overnight was filled in with new pink skin.
Wow.
He went running to his mum, and his mum looked at him and said, what have you done? What have you done? Right, you're coming down to the doctor. So they went to see the doctor, and the doctor simply said, healed act of God.
Wow.
Now, this boy came in and we looked at his leg. It was phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. And the next 3 months in that school, there was a revival happening. And I think by the end of it, it was 150 plus children had become Christians, staff members, parents, so many incredible healings.
And the catalyst was the miracle, was it?
Yes, it was.
Which is very Acts of the Apostles, isn't it? I mean, Acts of the Apostles, they just demonstrated the power of God. And with a demonstration of the power, many were added. Often at the proclamation only, a few were added. That comes several times, isn't it, in the Acts of the Apostles?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it culminated actually, and I don't necessarily want to go through every story, but it culminated in a boy being raised from the dead. And so, I mean, that was all through what the children were praying. It was down to their prayers. I mean, there was one day a boy came in. Such was the faith level amongst the children. They just gathered and they prayed. I mean, each of them, I would say, there was such a stirring of God within them. It was just wonderful. Boy came in, couldn't even get his foot in a slipper. It was so swollen. And I just remember saying, and I've never said this since, I wouldn't say this, but just moving in the spirit at the time, stamp on your foot in Jesus' name. The swelling just disappeared. And they saw the power of God, these children. And
some people are going to struggle with that one, aren't they? Can you say a bit more? Say a bit more.
Yeah. As in the stamping on the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have never sensed and felt that I should say anything like that again.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, um, wisely or unwisely, that was what I felt I should say. And so that is what I actually called out. And I just said, just stamp on your foot. And the swelling disappeared. Well, it isn't something that we want to be saying to people on a daily basis, I believe. I think that was a special situation that needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it was daily that we were seeing just wonderful, wonderful things. And having grandparents and parents writing letters saying, "Thank you so much for what is happening to my son," this, that, and the other. It's amazing how they've changed, and so many great stories.
Did anyone write a book on it, document it, with any outside interest from journalists?
I actually went along one day to a radio broadcast. It was somewhere in Kent, and Steve Chalk actually was with me being interviewed on but something else. So we had a friendship which started that day. But I was able to share some stories then. And then again, there was a gathering in Guildford one day when I shared a whole lot of stories from it.
But I'm thinking, it sounds so amazing that you'd get sort of secular outside skeptical interest. Did any of that come?
Well, yeah, I think we were protected incredibly in that respect. There was no voice that came saying, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" in any negative context.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, which I just believe that was the grace of God over me as a young Christian still, over all these children. So it was something to look back on and thank God for, because I've had many situations since where I've had people say, "How can you say that God loves us? How can you say?" And all sorts of questions have been raised since, which they weren't at the time.
Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I'm loving the response we're getting from across the world. It's just wonderful to see how encouraging and inspiring it is being and hitting the spot. Listen, if you are being blessed by it, I'd love it. Basically, this happens under the auspices of our ministry, Great Lakes Outreach, which works in the poorest and the hungriest country in the world, which is Burundi. We're having an incredible impact in the toughest of circumstances. We want to carry on supporting those local folks doing a great job. So if you wanted to, greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. You could make a donation there. I'd so appreciate it. Also, it's word of mouth, isn't it? So gossip these podcasts to other people, get them to subscribe, give us a great review. Absolutely wonderful. So grateful to you. So that's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. If you want to do a monthly, a couple of quid a month, or a one-off donation, we'd be incredibly grateful. All right, now let's get back to the podcast. So that was during your first teaching post, and then you've moved about a bit. Other stories from different places?
Yeah, very briefly, I'll tell you one or two stories. I mean, the next school, actually, there was a miracle which I have seen just replicated over the last 2 or 3 months. So I will share it because, again, I was teaching a lesson, geography, I think it might have been on this occasion. And a child in the classroom, they were, how old were they? Well, what we would now say were year fives, so probably 10 years of age. And a child said, "Mr. T, can God do anything?" And again, what a question. And I sort of stopped and thought, is this something I should answer? So I said, "Well, yes, he can. But let's just get on with what we're doing now." The boy didn't want to stop, and he said, "Could he heal Abigail's feet?" Now, her feet were turned inwards.
Right.
Both feet, very obviously. And at this point, I stopped and thought, "Oh, Lord, I know you can do this. But I don't know if I have any faith level right now that you're going to do anything like that."
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm teaching this lesson. I'm not sure it's the right thing to do. I had all these thoughts going through my mind. probably all of that went through my mind in the space of a few seconds. And before I knew what I was saying, I said, yes, yes, he can. Well, why don't we ask him? Came the question. And I said, right, come on then. Who's going to pray? And I don't know, somebody prayed. And I've said to many people since, I made a mistake. I closed my eyes. Because when I opened my eyes, the feet had straightened out.
Wow.
The children were jumping. I mean, it was just carnage. Yes. Who cared what we were teaching from that moment on? Yeah. I mean, it was fantastic. The mum came in after school and said, what have you done to Abigail's feet? And I said, nothing, but God has healed her. I said, I hope you're happy. She said, I am deliriously happy. She said, it's incredible. So again, that could have been difficult, but God's protection through all of my teaching career on living out my faith has been, well, I'll call it rock solid. It's been wonderful. But I shared that story with a group of people just recently. I was invited, someone shared the story, and lo and behold, there was a boy who was there whose feet were in a similar state. Mm-hmm. And he came forward for prayer. I didn't pray for him, somebody else did. And the next thing I knew, this boy was running up and down this building with his dad. His shoes and socks were off, and there was all sorts of noise happening. And they came to the microphone and shared the story that his feet had straightened out. I mean, how wonderful!
It is wonderful. You know, I know some of us listening, we can sort of handle hearing stories of miracles in Africa, but a number of people really struggle with miracles in this context, and we've got such sort of secular sort of goggles on, aren't we, as we view reality?
Very much
these
so.
Stories really challenge that, don't they? And then can you speak into, why does it always happen over there but doesn't happen much here?
Because I've had some involvement in Kenya, just as you've had involvement in Africa. Well, I can only look at what I see there and what I typically see here. And I would just say the simplicity of the faith of a typical African person against a typical British person is simply that they will believe God. They will believe. And so the Bible makes it very clear that we live by faith and not by sight.
Yeah.
And the more we live by sight, the less we are going to see of the supernatural. Mm-hmm. And I believe that, if you look at the fact that in Africa, you could argue very much that what else have they got to depend upon? Mm-hmm. And here we have so much. I mean, someone said to me one point in time, where's your security, David? Mm-hmm. And it really challenged me because I thought, well, I know my security should be in God.
Yeah.
But it was so easy to rely on all sorts of other things around me.
Yeah.
Financially and in all sorts of other ways. And so that would be my very, very simplistic, basic answer.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I suppose I see, I love being with children, and I love teaching children, supporting children, encouraging children, because children will believe more readily than typically adults will, with all the layers perhaps of doubt and fear and unbelief that creep in.
Cynicism, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, listen, you just said there, where is your security? I think that's just a line that I wouldn't mind us having a 5-second pause on. Listener, where is your security? Great question to ponder. David, you've just mentioned Kenya. So why don't you, how did that come about? What's happened there?
Yeah, right from the start, I'm talked about when I was baptized in the Spirit, and there have been various key things that have been with me ever since then. One, as I say, were the gifts of the Spirit and what I shared. One was working with children, and one was involvement in Africa, and those themes have been have been with me all through my life as a Christian. And around about 7, 8, 9, oh, I don't know, I'm going to say 8 years ago, perhaps, where I live in Derby, we had a PE gathering, and at it, someone shared from the Derby County Football Club how they were taking people out to a project in Africa as part of the charitable arm of the club, and they'd been going for 2 years, and this time they wanted to take some teachers out. I heard that, and I couldn't think of anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I was just totally set on this was my opportunity to get out there. And my head teacher, the school, were very happy for me to go. So I went out with this group, and oh my goodness, there were 37 of us. I was the only one who was Christian amongst the 37. And right from the start, it was as if, well, and I say rather foolishly, I could say in a way, it's as if God had set it all out. Just situations just popped up in front of me. People to pray for, things to share, people to meet. And we saw the most, I mean, it was just phenomenal 12 days, I think it was. I mean, there were just so many miracles. One day, I came out off this minibus. We'd all come in one of the minibuses on one morning, and there were a group of street children outside, and I just felt a compulsion to pray for one particular boy, and his eyes, they were really strange. And I said to the head teacher of the school, "Can you tell me what's up with this boy here?" "Yes, he lives on my street.
Mm-hmm.
He's blind."
Wow.
I said, "Oh, my goodness, right." I said, "Look, can I pray for him?" "Oh, yes, certainly." As you would have found, Simon, it's very easy to respond.
Yeah.
So I prayed, I mean, a really simple prayer. That's all I remember, very briefly prayed. And then there was all sorts of things happening, and the color of his eyes seemed to change. It was just incredible what went on. Anyway, the head teacher was doing all sorts of things, and we found the boy could then see.
Beautiful.
I mean, it was. I mean, I stood there in all sorts of different ways, just well, obviously joyful, but thinking, "Oh God, what have you just done?" Yes, I've always wanted to see it. Did I actually really believe it? I don't know. I think I did.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
And there was nobody I could tell. All the group people on my party, none of them I felt I could suddenly go and say, "By the way, this has just happened."
Yeah.
And so I think it was that night we were all having a meal, the 37 of us in the middle of this town. We were interrupted by the head teacher, who came in and said to the man leading it, "Can I have a word with you and David?" And the man said, "Look, can we not just have a bit of time? This is our time off." And he said, "No, it's really important." And he said to this man leading it, he said, "Because you have come over here, a boy who was blind now sees."
Wow.
And this
I
man,
love that.
and I mean, I see him from time to time now. This man was totally perplexed. What on earth are you talking about?
Yeah.
So we shared the story. I shared the story, and the whole of this group were just sat wanting to hear other stories.
Wonderful.
It was just wonderful.
Cool.
So I've had lots of involvement. I've been out to Kenya 4 times, and have an involvement now where in a work in Western Kenya, which started about a year and a half to probably 2 years ago now, with some words of knowledge, which I would love to talk a little bit about. But it started with some words of knowledge and God healing a child and people becoming Christians. And now there's churches that have started as a result simply of that. So that's some involvement I've had in Africa.
I love hearing those stories. I've never seen someone who's blind seeing, but in a couple of weeks I'll be back out in Burundi, and there hopefully I'll get to see my friend Louis again. And Louis, this time 2 years ago, was blind. He was a beggar on the street. He had nothing. He came on one of our outreaches. He was prayed for. He got his sight fully back. And I've got a picture of him arm in arm with me, and we gave him some goats and pigs last Christmas, and now he's got a little Kickstarter business going. He's found a wrinkly old babe to marry, and he's got the cheesiest grin, utter joy as the gospel has completely transformed his life. It's just beautiful.
Oh, so good.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Now, you've recently got back from France and Switzerland. What was going on there?
Yes, my brother actually leads a church in Lyon.
Mm-hmm.
And he has various other churches who he sort of supports. And that was a wonderful opportunity to go and work with him. I spoke in the various places, and we saw just such a glorious flow in a place where it is generally quite tough, I think, as a Christian, as my brother was saying. We saw such a flow of God doing things supernaturally. Many healed. Not so many on this occasion becoming Christians, but it was a flow of God's goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that stood out for me at the end was working with some children in the church, and them asking all sorts of questions regarding healing. And I was answering them and started talking about hearing from God.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how to hear from God. And that was a wonderful time, because it ended up with many of them asking God to give them words of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And they received all sorts of things. We went back into the main meeting where the adults were, and to actually see these children sharing what they had, and then seeing people being healed as a result, was, I've come back with so fired up with that picture. And, once again, realizing just how children can so easily lead the way rather than be in the, added extras, if you like, within a church.
And presumably you're getting them, because words of knowledge is one thing, but we want them rooted, don't we, in the Word of God? Are you doing those hand in hand?
Yeah, very much so. Yes. I mean, well, particularly with my grandchildren, shall we say, who I see a lot. But yes, I mean, just talking in terms of a base from whereby we are actually listening and believing.
Now, you've seen God move in healings and miracles, but would you say it's just for certain people? I mean, I'm not experiencing what some of the stuff you've been talking about, and I think most people say, "Oh, is this one?" Some would be saying, "Oh, I'm struggling to believe it," and others would be saying, "Well, it's just for the holy few, the elite, the Premier League."
Oh, well, I would simply answer that I believe God wants to move in us and through us with every single thing that we need at any one particular point. And I mean, it makes it clear in the Bible that some are apostles, some are prophets, some are pastors, teachers, evangelists, and so on. And the gifts of the Spirit, it makes it clear that in there that we are to ask. And so I believe it is simply about us asking. Now, I think it's clear that some people are, just as they might be have a gift of encouragement or of a pastoring skill, a gift, or a teacher or whatever, that there are some who move more in the area of, shall we say, healing. But I'm convinced, and with the people that I'm with in my church, and looking to encourage everybody. Look, this is for everybody, and God never says this is for a group of pastors. He says this is for you, my children, and it's about learning. It's about reaching out, realizing that this is, I think, often breaking, as you say, there the mold almost, whereby we think so easily, and because I did at one point, we think so easily that this is just for certain people. And that's part of my mission, is really to help people understand that it's for everyone, and then help disciple them to move in these areas.
Yes, it's so much harder for us, isn't it, to have that childlike simplicity of faith. I remember a story of a missionary in South America praying with the local believers for healing, and then he left, and then they carried on praying, and the person was healed, and to his conviction, hopefully not feeling just terrible about himself, he said afterwards, they said to him, look, we once you left, we felt that there was faith in the room to see the miracle.
Wow.
And that is convicting. I don't want anyone to feel guilty and condemned as we discuss this stuff, because I've got so far to go, and I'm often saying, oh Lord, please increase my faith. I hope we're just generally inspired by testimonies that God, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's Hebrews 13, verse 5, isn't it? Actually, verse 8.
I want to preface all of these stories with, it's great to have opportunities to pray for people and to see God move. And I do believe that this will be, as we look at this and teach and understand how and just who God is and what he's already done. I mean, his salvation is complete, with forgiveness of sin, for healing of whatever, for deliverance, for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But there's so many times I pray for people and I don't see any obvious result.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to feel as if I've made a mistake. Have I got something wrong? Have I heard wrongly here? And you can doubt all sorts yourself. And various people have said to me, David, when you pray and you know who you are when you're praying, you're a child of God. Mm-hmm. When you pray and you pray that prayer, it is answered in heaven. And it's God's then prerogative, if you like, as to when that answer is seen in the life of the person. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of things that even beyond that I would say I have no idea.
Yeah. There's
I'm
a mystery,
just,
isn't there?
David, a believer, looking to walk as best I can with all that God's given.
Yeah. I mean, you seem very balanced. There are obviously, we've all sort of seen on satellite TV, the abuses in the movement that make you totally cynical and want to not go near it with the barge pole. But if we're doing it in humility and grace and leaving the element of mystery fully in place, we haven't got all the answers. God is sovereign. It's his call. I don't want to shut off anything of what God might do through me.
Right.
You talk about God speaking through you. How do you know when he's speaking through you?
I mean, I think I was taught something many years ago that was so simple. It was so helpful. And it was simply, it looks at the scripture where if you ask your Father in heaven for something, for bread, is he going to give you a stone? Yeah. No, he will give you bread because he's a loving, wonderful Heavenly Father. Mm-hmm. And he's a father who loves his children. And really, this was simply around the fact that if you ask the Father for something, whose voice are you going to hear first? You're going to hear the Father's voice. And I think I'll preface this by, we want to be in a place of peace when we're actually asking. But when I ask, what nearly always happens is I will hear something. And if we can look at it in so many different ways, can't we? I mean, by hearing from God. But if I were to look upon it as in words of knowledge, let's say I ask God for something, and I sense either a picture might come, or I might have a thought in my mind, or I might have a feeling of some sort of pain in my body somewhere. Those often might happen. I will then almost immediately have some sort of doubt that follows it. Mm-hmm. And I've learned, and I'm learning, probably be a better way of putting it, but I'm learning now to know that my Father in heaven wants to touch people 1,000,000 or however much more times more than I ever do anyway. And he longs for me, for you, for everyone to ask him and to be ready to be at his call and be ready. And so I now learn to realize I'm going on what he shows me, that first thing.
Yeah.
And that the devil then wants to come in and say, oh, no, don't be ridiculous. There's no one here with such and such, something wrong with them. And, I have fallen foul of that so many times and not given out what I believe God has given me.
Yeah.
But when I do step out, I would say, 90-something% of the time, I find that what I say is true and correct. And so I've learned now over the years to just how to hear more effectively. And it is something that I desire greatly to go and to teach and to disciple people in.
Brilliant. David, I'm really annoyed that we're pretty much out of time, but about 30 minutes ago, you sort of, not glibly, but you almost got away with just saying, and it culminated with raising someone from the dead. I can't let you get away with that. So can you finish telling that story?
Oh, golly. Yeah, group of children in a classroom, and I said, right, what have we got to pray for? And people shouted out different things, and one boy said, my cousin has a brain tumor. And he was a Zambian. So here we go with our African link. He was a Zambian. And we prayed for the different people, and different children prayed different prayers. And that was almost the end of a term. And that was the end. I mean, if you asked me 3 weeks later, what do we pray for? I'm not sure I would have remembered all the prayers. But the next term began. It was the one after the long summer. So it was a September, the whatever. And this boy came running up to me and he said, Mr. T, guess what? And I couldn't remember what he might be talking about until he said, my cousin, he died.
Right.
And you're the brain tumor. He said, yeah. And I thought, well, why is he smiling? So I obviously asked the questions. And he said that he was in a hospital in Lusaka, capital of Zambia. And he had this brain tumor. He died. And 2 days later, they were wheeling him in a stretcher trolley, down to the mortuary, and he sat bolt upright on the stretcher. And it was reported in the papers there. 2 members of the government apparently became Christians. I mean,
love it.
These are stories. So it's just, you just think, well, these children, they prayed, they believed.
Yeah.
Who are we to say what's going to happen tomorrow or today?
Oh, David, it's been brilliant talking. It's been inspiring for me. It's been encouraging. It's been faith building. I hope it's been that for you, listener. For some of you, you might just have more questions. And David, would you be up for people engaging with you if I put your email in the chat?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a joy to have spoken to you, and there's so many stories I'd love to have told, but it's been great. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I know you've got loads more stories, and we've got a smattering of them. So I'll put your email in the chat, and I think we'll have to call it a day. So, David, thanks so much for your time, mate. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you. Yeah. May everyone be blessed.
Wonderful. Well, listen, everybody, I hope you've been inspired. I have. And I just want to close off by saying thank you to Adam Thomas Steer for editing, for Mike Sandyman for mixing. If you've enjoyed it, please give us a great review wherever you're watching it, iTunes, Spotify. If you want to be in touch with me, simongilbert.com or any of the other social media platforms. In the meantime, keep smiling, go for it, keep firing, and we'll be back next week with another superb guest. So in the meantime, toodaloo.